Well, listen to a story about a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer, barely kept his family fed. And then one day he was shooting at some food, and up through the ground come a bubble and crude.
Oil, that is.
Black gold. Texas tea. Well, the first thing you know, old Jed is a millionaire. The kinfolk said, Jed, move away from there. Said, California is the place you ought to be. So they loaded up the truck and they moved to Beverly.
Hills, that is.
Swimming pools. Movie stars. The Beverly Hillbilly. The sun was shining bright and hot over the massive, sprawling estate in Beverly Hills, but inside the sprawling mansion and around its lush gardens, life was continuing in its own peculiar, rustic rhythm. Jed Clampett, a tall, calm man with a gentle demeanor and an unshakable sense of honesty, stood near the edge of the manicured lawn. He adjusted his old hat, looking out over the property with a mixture of wonder and mild perplexity. Not too far away, his daughter, Ellie Mae, a beautiful, nature-loving young woman with an extraordinary bond with animals, was tending to her various pets, her long blonde hair caught in the soft breeze. Nearby, Jethro Bodine, Jed's enthusiastic, burly, but somewhat dim-witted nephew, was trying to figure out a complex way to do a very simple chore, scratching his head in deep thought. Suddenly, a loud screech broke the morning quiet. It was Daisy Moses, affectionately known to everyone as Granny. She was a tiny, fierce woman with gray hair pulled tightly back, boundless energy, and a stubborn streak whiter than the Mississippi River. She was stomping through the garden, clutching an old shotgun, her eyes darting around with intense focus. "Sneaky little vermin coming in on my blind side," Granny muttered, her voice crackling with determination as she aimed toward the corn patch she had insisted on planting in the middle of the pristine estate. "You just stay right there, honey. I am going to give you some rock salt and some bacon rind to go with your corn." Before anyone could stop her, a loud blast echoed through the neighborhood. Birds scattered from the nearby palm trees, and a cloud of smoke drifted across the lawn. Jed walked over slowly, his boots thudding softly against the grass. He looked at the smoking barrel of the gun, then looked around to see what had happened. Jethro came jogging over, carrying his own hat in his hand, looking bewildered. "What did you shoot, Grant?" Jethro asked, blinking through the smoke. "I shot my hat," a voice called back. But it wasn't Granny. It was old Cousin Grant, who had been resting near the porch, holding up a dusty cap that now featured a rather large, ragged hole right through the center. "What for?" Jethro asked, completely puzzled by the sight of a man shooting his own clothing. "There was a crow sitting on it, that is what," Grant grumbled, shaking his head and trying to smooth down the ruined fabric. Jed sighed softly, a gentle, patient smile touching his lips. He turned his attention to Granny, who was already reloading her shotgun with practiced ease, completely unfazed by the commotion. "Granny, you are getting too old to do your own scarecrowing," Jed said softly, his voice full of genuine concern for the elderly matriarch. "Your joints will lock on you in this heat. Why don't you let me make you one?" Granny scoffed, waving her hand dismissively as she hoisted the heavy gun back onto her shoulder. "Because there ain't no scarecrow that can shoot straight," she declared proudly, snapping the barrel shut. Jed chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "You didn't do too good yourself just now, Granny," he pointed out with a wry grin. "Oh, I got the crow," Granny insisted, her eyes widening with satisfaction. "I blowed that rascal to kingdom come. There ain't enough left of him to feather an arrow." As Granny marched back toward the kitchen entry, Ellie Mae came running around the corner of the house, looking deeply distressed. She was cradling a small, very startled-looking bird in her arms, sheltering it protectively against her denim shirt. "Granny, would you please stop shooting at Elmer?" Ellie Mae pleaded, her big eyes full of sympathy for the creature. "You are making him awful nervous." Granny glanced at the bird, her expression hardening into a stern scowl. "Get that vermin out of here," she snapped, gesturing with her thumb toward the outer gates. Ellie Mae turned to her father, hoping for some assistance. "Speak to her, pal," she said, looking at Jed with a worried frown. "She is making a nervous wreck out of him." "I will make a pie out of him," Granny countered sharply, adjusting her apron. The idea of dragging in dead birds into a proper household doesn't look very dead to me, Jed remarked, leaning forward to inspect Elmer, who was currently blinking rapidly but otherwise fully intact. That rock salt preserves them, Granny said with absolute authority, nodding to herself as if stating a well-known scientific fact. Just as the argument seemed to be winding down, the back door of the mansion flew open with a bang. Out stepped Milburn Drysdale, the pompous, easily excited president of the Commerce Bank of Beverly Hills, who lived right next door. He looked completely disheveled, holding a piece of paper and a strange, unidentifiable object in his hands. His face was flushed with frustration. "Hey, somebody shot through the window of my bedroom," Mr. Drysdale announced, his voice trembling with a mix of outrage and sheer panic. "Looky here. Worst case of dander I have ever seen." Jed took a step closer, squinting at the object in the banker's hand. He reached out, took a small pinch of the white substance, and examined it closely. "That is rock salt," Jed explained calmly, showing it to the bewildered businessman. "And this here is a piece of bacon rind." Mr. Drysdale stared at his hand, horror dawning on his face. "That ain't gonna cure it," he muttered, completely missing the point of what had actually occurred. Granny stepped forward, tapping her chin thoughtfully as she evaluated Mr. Drysdale's apparent affliction. "He will have to dip his head in hot creosote," she announced solemnly, offering her finest mountain medical advice. "Now listen, Granny," Mr. Drysdale began, his voice rising to a shrill pitch as he imagined the painful remedy. "Calm down, boy," Jed interrupted gently, placing a steadying hand on the banker's shoulder before turning back to his mother-in-law. "Granny, suppose you go out and look after your corn crop for a bit." Granny threw her hands up in the air, letting out a dramatic sigh of utter defeat. "What is the use? Nobody can grow nothing around here," she complained loudly. "What with the crybabies, the crows, and the bats." "We ain't got no bats," Jethro chimed in, looking up at the clear morning sky as if expecting a swarm to appear at any moment. "What about the old bat next door?" Granny retorted, referring directly to Mrs. Drysdale, who was notorious for her disapproval of the Clampett family's rustic lifestyle. "Calls the police every time you try to do something to improve the place, like raise hogs or chickens or run a few goats." "Granny, you can't fault Miss Drysdale for that," Jed reasoned gently, trying to maintain the peace between the households. "You gotta remember you are living in the city now." "You call this living?" Granny shouted, her voice echoing across the courtyard. "I am buried in the city, and I am getting tired of it." Jed looked at her, his heart softening. He knew how much the elderly woman missed the wide-open spaces, the fresh mountain air, and the freedom of their old life. "All right, Granny," he said soothingly. "Why don't we live in the country where folks can breathe, raise things, and shoot off a gun?" Granny's face lit up instantly. "All right, Granny," she agreed, her mood flipping entirely from rage to absolute joy. As Granny trotted back toward the house, humming a lively tune, Jed watched her go, a thoughtful expression on his weathered face. He turned to Jethro, an idea beginning to form in his mind. "Oh, listen, Nuggins, I got a first-rate idea," Jed said, calling Jethro by his favorite nickname. "You know, Granny's birthday is coming up soon," Jed continued, pulling Jethro closer so they wouldn't be overheard. "I know," Jethro nodded eagerly, his face breaking into a wide smile. "Yeah, I am going to make her a scarecrow for her corn patch," Jed said, leaning against a large stone pillar. "And I'm going to make her a great big old cedar chest. You know how she has always talked about needing one to store her winter quilts and her special liniments. It is a dandy present." Jethro nodded enthusiastically, completely on board with the plan. "You know what I am going to give her?" Jethro asked, leaning in close. "What, Pa?" Ellie Mae asked, joining the conversation as she released Elmer back into the safety of the bushes. "A piece of ground," Jed announced proudly, his eyes shining with anticipation. "A nice plot out in the country, where she can plant things to her heart is content." "Hot dog!" Jethro yelled, clapping his hands together. "I will call Mr. Drysdale right now, and see if he has got any land for sale." "Oh, excuse me, Uncle Jed," Jethro corrected himself quickly, tapping his forehead. You don't have to call Mr. Drysdale about buying a plot of ground. I seen some for sale yesterday.
You did?
Jed asked, looking genuinely surprised and impressed by his nephew's attentiveness. Well, yes, sir. Out in the country, too. Great big sign alongside the road. Said, buy your loved one a plot in Happy Valley. Jed nodded slowly, absorbing the information. Here we go.
Happy Valley. Green is like that.
Like a fun spot. Jethro pulled a small, crumpled piece of paper from his pocket, squinting at the scribbled handwriting. Here he is.
Happy Valley.
I will call him for you, Pa. Here is the number, Ellie. Now, remember, you are not to say a single word to Granny, Jed warned them, raising a finger to his lips. We want this to be a total surprise for her special day. Ellie Mae hurried into the house to use the telephone, repeating the name under her breath, so she wouldn't forget it. Happy Valley.
Happy Valley.
Meanwhile, in a quiet, neatly organized office on the other side of town, a man named Mr. Mortimer was sitting at his desk. The office was decorated with framed certificates and peaceful landscapes, maintaining a somber, respectful atmosphere. The telephone on his desk rang loudly, breaking the silence. He picked up the receiver with a practiced, smooth professional tone. Mr. Mortimer speaking, he said, leaning back in his leather chair. Howdy, Mr. Mortimer. Jed's voice boomed through the line, clear and full of rustic energy. This here is Jed Clampett. I am wanting to buy a nice plot of ground for Granny. Mr. Mortimer adjusted his glasses, pulling a fresh notepad toward himself. I see. Jed Clampett, he wrote down the name carefully. And you want something nice for your grandmother? Well, no, Jed corrected him, wanting to be entirely accurate about the family tree. Strictly speaking, she is my mother-in-law.
Oh.
Mr. Mortimer said, his tone shifting slightly as he made an assumption about family dynamics.
Something inexpensive, then.
Oh, no, Jed replied instantly, dismissing the idea completely. Money is no object. I want the best you got. Provided, of course, this land of yours is out in the country where a body can enjoy it. Oh, it is, Mr. Clampett, Mr. Mortimer assured him, thinking of the pristine, quiet lawns of his establishment. Happy Valley is in a beautiful pastoral setting. Good, Jed said, sounding thoroughly pleased. It is pasture land. Well, I reckon that will be just dandy. You see, Granny don't want to be buried in the city, especially in the backyard. Mr. Mortimer blinked, a bit taken aback by the wording, but he quickly recovered his professional composure. Well, I should hope not, he said softly. As a matter of fact, it is against the law. Oh, yeah, we found that out. Jed chuckled into the receiver, entirely missing the legal context. Every time we go to dig in, our neighbor calls the police on us. Mr. Mortimer froze, his pen hovering over the paper. A sudden wave of concern washed over him. He cleared his throat nervously, wondering what kind of people he was dealing with. Mr. Clampett, are you by any chance on welfare? He asked cautiously. No, sir, Jed answered, sounding slightly confused by the question. Crestview. 518 Crestview Drive. No, Mr. Mortimer clarified quickly, shaking his head. I am referring to your ability to meet your financial obligation. I appreciate your calling Happy Valley, but I will have to ask about credit. Jed thought about this for a moment, remembering how they had found out about the property in the first place. Well, it was Jethro's senior sign, so I reckon he ought to get the credit, Jed explained with simple, honest logic. No, Mr. Clampett, you don't understand, Mr. Mortimer sighed, realizing he needed to simplify his terms. Let me put it this way. Do you have a bank account? Yes, sir, Jed said proudly. I keep my money in a commerce bank in Beverly Hills. Just then, Jed heard a floorboard creak behind him. He turned around to see Granny standing in the doorway, her arms crossed, watching him with an incredibly suspicious look on her face. Jethro is past, Granny, Jed said quickly into the telephone, wanting to end the conversation before the surprise was ruined. I will talk to you later.
Bye.
He slammed the receiver down and tried to look as casual as possible, leaning against the desk. What is going on? Granny demanded, stepping into the room and glaring at him. You look guilty as 3 possums in a hen house. What are you talking about, Granny? Jed asked, offering an innocent smile. Who was that on the telephone? Granny pressed, taking another step forward.
What?
Nobody, Granny. Jed lied smoothly, gently guiding her back toward the kitchen to distract her. Back at the Happy Valley office, Mr. Mortimer hung up his phone, his eyes wide with excitement. He looked up as his top salesman, a man named Mr. Brubaker, walked into the room carrying a briefcase. I am ready to call on the bereaved family, Mr. Mortimer, Mr. Brubaker announced, adjusting his tie and looking very professional. Good, Mr. Mortimer said, jumping up from his desk and handing over a fresh sheet of paper. Now, here is your fact sheet. The name is J.D. Clampett. The address is Beverly Hills, and the bank account is $65 million.
Mr. Brubaker is jaw-dropped.
He stared at the numbers on the page, his eyes bulging. 65 million? And the name of the loved one? Mr. Brubaker asked, his voice trembling slightly with the sheer scale of the potential commission. Look, as far as I am concerned, it is J.D. Clampett, Mr. Mortimer said, waving his hand dismissively. I meant the name of the dearest party, Mr. Brubaker clarified, tapping the form. I don't know, Mr. Mortimer admitted. It is his mother-in-law.
They call her Granny.
I want you to try to sell them a family plot. These people are loaded. Mr. Brubaker looked over the sheet again, calculating the options. I see there are 4 in the family, he noted. Yes, but I want you to sell them 5 plots. 1 for their banker, Mr. Mortimer instructed with a greedy grin. Banker? Mr. Brubaker asked, looking confused. Believe me, when Clampett goes, that guy will kill himself, Mr. Mortimer laughed, thoroughly amused by his own joke. Come to think of it, the banker is married too. Sell them a 6-pack. Mr. Brubaker shook his head, a bit uncomfortable with the aggressive sales tactic. Mr. Mortimer, try to remember you are not peddling beer anymore, he reminded his boss. I am not peddling plots either, Mr. Mortimer grumbled, his smile fading. The guy that sold me this property said I would make a killing here. I may have to get any business. Meanwhile, back at the Clampett estate, Granny was sitting on a wooden stool in the courtyard, holding a small stone jar. She looked thoroughly exhausted from her morning of defense maneuvers against the local wildlife. All right, she muttered to herself, pulling the cork from the jar. You had fair warning. She took a small sip of her homemade remedy, letting out a sharp gasp as it burned its way down. This time, you are going in a pot, she said, shaking her fist at an imaginary crow. Jed walked out of the house, noticing the jar in her hand and the look of fierce determination in her eyes. You don't leave off shooting. You're going to have the police down on you again, Granny, he warned gently. I aim to take one more shot, Granny insisted, holding up the jar. Rheumatism medicine. Jed walked over and gently took the jar from her hands, inspecting the contents with a knowing look. I believe I would take it easy on that jerk too, Granny, he suggested, setting it down on a nearby table. This is strictly for medical purposes, Granny argued, snatching the jar back protectively. I can feel the rheumatism burning its way up my legs. I got to build me a fire break. Watch my stomach. She took another swig, her eyes watering from the strength of the brew. More? Jed asked, raising an eyebrow. That was from the left leg, Granny wheezed, wiping her mouth with the back of her hand.
Ah.
Better living through chemistry. Jed shook his head, a fond smile on his face. I don't think you even got rheumatism in your arm, come to think of it, he teased gently. That is enough of that for now. Just then, Mr. Brubaker walked through the garden gates, holding his briefcase tightly. He looked around the massive estate, feeling a bit out of place but determined to make the sale of a lifetime. He spotted Jed and Granny, standing near the porch. There is medicine, Pa. Ellie Mae called out as she walked out of the house, holding a small bowl of icing. Oh, it is about your mother-in-law, Granny, Mr. Brubaker said, stepping forward and introducing himself with a polite bow. Granny narrowed her eyes at the stranger, instantly becoming defensive. You ain't from the police, are you? She demanded. No, I am from, Mr. Brubaker began, but Granny interrupted him with a sigh of relief. Good, Granny said, nodding to herself. I was hoping they hadn't heard about the shooting yet. Mr. Brubaker froze, his smile faltering. There has been a shooting? He asked, his voice dropping an octave as fear crept in. "It is Granny," Jed explained with a casual shrug, referring to her wild adventures with a shotgun. Mr. Brubaker swallowed hard, looking between the calm man and the fierce elderly woman. He cleared his throat, trying to stick to his script.
What can I do for you, Pa?
He asked, trying to use the familial terms he had overheard to build rapport. "I am from Happy Valley," Mr. Brubaker announced, holding up his business card. "Oh, yeah," Jed said, his face lighting up as he remembered the telephone conversation. "I want to get a plot of ground for Granny." "Oh, and let me keep a watch out the back door. See we ain't surprised by anyone." "Yes, sir, Pa," Jethro called out from across the yard, where he was standing guard near the hedge line. Mr. Brubaker felt a cold sweat breaking out on the back of his neck. He looked around the estate, suddenly feeling very isolated. "We have some very nice plots," he stammered, trying to keep his voice steady. "How would you like a hillside location?" "No, I had enough of that back home," Jed said, shaking his head firmly. "Hillside ain't no place for planting anything serious. Just could rain comes along, body could get washed out completely." Ellie Mae nodded in agreement, setting her bowl down. "Ellie, you recollect what happened with the greens?" Jed asked her. "Sure do, Pa," Ellie Mae answered quickly. "We put them in on the hill back of the cabin." Along came a massive cloudburst. The next morning there was greens all over that back porch. You couldn't go out the back door without stepping on them. "We just let the hogs and chickens have them after that." Mr. Brubaker stared at them, his mind racing as he misinterpreted every single word they were saying. He felt his hands begin to shake. "You warm?" Jed asked, noticing the salesman's sudden pale complexion. "No," Mr. Brubaker whispered, his voice cracking. "No, as a matter of fact, I think I am having a sudden chill." "Well, have a slug of this," Granny offered, extending her stone jar toward him with a generous grin. "No," Mr. Brubaker said, backing away slightly. "No, thank you very much." "Good for what ails you," Jed encouraged him with a warm smile. "Sure took care of Granny when she was having her spells." "What do you mean?" Mr. Brubaker asked, his eyes wide with terror. "2 drinks of that, and she didn't feel a thing," Jed explained simply, meaning it knocked her right to sleep. "That is," Mr. Brubaker swallowed hard, clutching his briefcase to his chest. "That is very, very merciful. Where is the loved one now?"
Who? Granny?
Jed asked, looking around the yard. "Oh, she is out back in the corn patch right now." "In the corn patch?" Mr. Brubaker repeated, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Makes a dandy scarecrow," Jed said proudly, pointing toward the edge of the property where a set of old clothes was hanging. "See her yonder? She is popped up against that clothesline post." Mr. Brubaker's jaw dropped. He could barely